Hi, everyone. I'm Craig Collins, and this is the What the Warehouse show. With me today, I have Ian Mackenzie. Ian is a supply chain specialist. He has been around for a number of years, but I'm going to let him introduce himself and to tell you about that. Ian, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Craig. Thanks for having me on the show. Just to dive into my background, 25, I hate to say almost 30 years in the industry. And the first 10, I was in the music industry as a roadie and a lighting technician and a stage manager and a road manager. And I didn't realize till a decade after that that was all logistics. And I kind of continued to attach my path to food service, then into consumer electronics. I worked in high-end fashion at a global level. Also furniture, art and decor, the cannabis industry. And most recently, I'm working with natural-based fibers based from hemp. So that's the linkage with my previous role in the cannabis industry, but it's more on a global level in terms of removing microplastics from the supply chain.
Right. That's so cool. It's so important when we have a job like working in supply chain or logistics, but there is a higher calling as well. And that as you progressed, you're moving towards a position that actually can benefit the planet. And
yeah, and I've made a conscious decision probably in the last 10 years to start looking for roles where I could leave, not only leave my mark, but make a change in people's lives every day. So the cannabis industry didn't sound like it, but when I learned more about the medical side of it, I was quite surprised. And obviously what I'm currently in today is a huge undertaking in the non-woven industry to drive out plastic.
Right. So both of those are interesting topics, but we'll come back to them. I really want to discuss the cannabis industry. I find that supply chain fascinating. But tell us, in our pre-chats, we covered some of this. Tell us about I know that we had a chat about your role as a supply chain person, actively involved in a company, then moving into a consulting role after leaving, and just talk us through that and what the challenge is of being in a role in supply chain and having all these balls up in the air and companies not really knowing what that supply chain person does.
Yeah. So what can happen often in our types of roles is at a C-suite level, though I was considered at that level, but I'm working remotely, accomplishing tasks that nobody sees, right? Logistics is the industry of, we're the Keebler elves in the background that nobody knows about unless something goes wrong. As soon as something goes wrong, then everyone points the fingers, but when nobody phones every day to say, thanks for getting the boxes delivered, because it just happens every day. So our board was putting some pressure on our CEO to make some SG&A reductions. And I think the fickle finger of fate pointed at my role. And I was told at the end of May that my role had been eliminated. And on June 1st, the folks I was working with came back and said, hey, we need to bring you back in as a consultant. Because what they didn't know is I had 5 containers on the ocean at that time, going from various ports to various ports, air cargo in the air. I was also the head of the ERP project for a new for Business Central that we're rolling out for the business. So since my layoff on May 31st, I've been working almost full time, and it's now August 4th. So it is really interesting. Like at first, I just kind of stepped. I mean, it was kind of a two-phase. Some people in my position might go, "Great, see you later, bye." I couldn't, with good faith, walk away from what I knew was going on and what I knew people didn't know. There was nobody. I was the entire logistics team was me. So there was not a person in the business that had any supply chain on the actual movement of goods around the world basis that I had. And so I needed to help, but they came back pretty quick. And the CEO was retired by the board, I'll say, in the nicest way possible, about 2 weeks after all the changes were made. Because there was a couple of the changes that happened as well too, but obviously mine had the most impact on me.
yeah, obviously. So that's just a word of warning out there. Is the reality is that what happens in the background in supply chain can have such an impact on the business, and that you had these 5 containers out there, you had a whole lot of balls in the air, and it's not something that just gets passed on easily. So
Yeah.
you know, good supply chain professionals out there, and this is a message out to all of you, is just understand how important your role is, and that you've got all of the stuff in place to be able to hand over to people. But more interesting stuff. Okay, I really want to talk about the cannabis industry. Tell us, and the reason is, you know, I'm driving around here in Canada, and at every single strip mall, there's 2 or 3 cannabis shops, and it's crazy how many there are, and they're almost all empty. There's no cars outside. They look like they're deserted. But so that industry has changed over the last 10 years. So tell us about when you got into it, and a bit about it.
Yeah. So in early 2018, I'd seen that the federal government announced that legalization was coming for October of that year. I think October of 2017, they gave a year's notice that they were going to change the regulations around cannabis, make it more accessible for people as a recreational product like alcohol, and gave a date that was all going to happen on. So there was a lot of people running with money to the industry to get first a license. You need to get licenses from Health Canada to grow cannabis, test cannabis, package cannabis. These are all separate licenses. Package cannabis. So you could have a license to grow, but if you didn't have a sales license, you couldn't sell it. Like the hierarchy of red tape was unbelievable. Must have been up to 8 or 9 licenses needed to finally get to a position where you could grow it, put it in a package, ship it somewhere, and sell it for revenue. So a lot of that stock money came into the market. People investing like crazy because everyone initially went to IPO to get investment. People threw billions of dollars at the industry, and the federal government projected big revenue for this thing. So just to understand, there were 55 license holders in Canada before legalization was announced. The week after legalization, there was 200. Currently today, there's over 600.
Wow.
And the market, like to your point, what you pointed out is exactly what's happening in the market. There's a huge contraction going on because there's too many players, too many growers, too much material. When I got in the industry, we were selling at a preset market value of $7 a gram for just regular cannabis. It's now, I think, below $2. You can imagine planning your revenue around that.
Yeah.
The other thing is, in this industry, everyone had to come from another industry. There wasn't like a functioning cannabis industry other than what they called the black market, the illegal market. So salespeople came from all walks of life, mostly alcohol, some from car and stuff, like a really dynamic mix of people that had to learn from 0 to 100, everything they could about cannabis to turn around and sell it. And the selling it was really just cutting POs with the liquor boards. It wasn't super complex, but everybody made it very complex. Most companies would create marketing boards and C-suites and have an entire marketing department. And you weren't legally allowed to market cannabis in the first couple of years that they released it. The packaging had to be very generic. You couldn't put fancy labels on it. You couldn't promote your package to be better than someone else's. You had to have very specific medical information. It was like buying getting a thing of pills from the pharmacy. Same generic label. You wouldn't know who the producer was. That's how Health Canada wanted it. So you can imagine what that meant for like competition in the marketplace. You got too many people growing too much cannabis and all being squeezed through this Health Canada pipe of regulations. And probably the single biggest thing that hammered the industry the most was the CRA, Canadian Revenue Agency, because they wanted to put an excise stamp on every sellable item. Well, an excise stamp is like an old postage stamp. Nobody had automation to put them on. No one had, people are literally putting material in a little package, sealing it, putting it in a box. So now you had to put a stamp in a very specific location or it would be rejected. And it had to be on every single one. And that's how they confirmed they were collecting tax. Liquor didn't require it. Like, it was so archaic. So CRA ran out of stamps in a month because everyone was ordering millions of stamps for their products. People are popping out of the woodwork with automated stamp application machines for $100,000, ERP for cannabis for $1 million, like high tech security delivery, and even the shipping of cannabis. The entire legislation, which must have been 150 pages, I read several times just to understand what the requirements are. It had one notation about shipping. It said to take reasonable steps to protect from theft or loss. That's it. But a lot of companies, including right up to the biggest ones, were paying armored cars, Brinks, like
Right.
thousands and thousands of dollars to drive boxes of cannabis from here to Kamloops. And another trucking company popped up with armed guards, cameras inside the truck, cameras in the cab, camera in the back. It was like they're delivering bags of cash, and it was a cardboard box about a foot, not even a foot by a foot, full of joints and those stupid little packages with a stamp on. It was crazy. It was, I saw through that as I started, because I kept asking CRA and Health Canada questions, because they would come around and visit the license holders, and I sat in every single meeting, and I'd say, so, clarify for me the stamps, because I had to go back to the distribution facility and help them understand how to put stamps on the packaging. I want to make sure we got it right. You also had to account for every single stamp. So if you damaged a stamp, you had to account for that. So how do you count numbered stamps without a machine to count them? And you had to write down the sequence of stamps that you used. So think about someone sitting in it. It was just, anyways, I'm sure hopefully there's people rolling their eyes at hearing this, because the background of this was crazy. And the packaging, just one other thing about the packaging was really interesting, is it had to be child safe. That makes sense, right? It had to be, couldn't have any, fancy or attracting images or colors on it. Yeah. It couldn't produce an odor. That makes sense. But Health Canada also required that it could not emit sound. So think about, yeah, exactly. I did the same face. I made the same face in the meeting with them, and they said, they just said they're just following the regulations. They're not making them. Like the federal, Health Canada, basically their thought was, if there's something in there and I shake it and hear it, I might be enticed to open it. And they're thinking about children who are getting a hold of this stuff, I guess. Like it was a crazy, but now everyone's running around trying to develop, a package that doesn't make sound. It was some of the wildest stuff I'd ever worked with, which was fun. It was a lot of fun. I worked with a really dynamic, awesome group of people. Once the C-suite got wiped out after about a year, there was a finance director, there was myself, and there was a salesperson who just had really good relationships with the liquor boards, and then the business started working. Right. The other one, and one other piece I'll share is what everyone didn't realize: the day you got your license till the day you could sell a revenue-driven unit took about 6 months. So if you didn't have the funding to get you through that, because you either had to buy your cannabis from a licensed grower or build your own greenhouse, so you can add a year to that, because you got to build the greenhouse, put in the seedlings, grow the plant. By the time the plant's grown, dried, packaged, tested in a box at a liquor store shelf where someone could actually take it and purchase it, was at least 6 months to a year from the very beginning. So all these companies were just burning cash, and that's the other side of it. Was there was some nefarious stuff going on with bad IPOs, and companies had no intentions of doing all the magical things they say they're going to do. A lot of them have gone by the wayside, including the company I worked with has gone by the wayside. They just weren't big enough to sustain in the market.
Yeah. Fascinating. It's just, and it literally has been in the last 5 years. It was like the Wild West to now having these sort of half deserted sort of strip malls with cannabis shops everywhere. Yeah.
And deserted greenhouses. There's a 2 million square foot greenhouse in Aldergrove near the U.S. border, empty. That Canopy, who was the biggest in Canada, one of the biggest in the world, growers and distributors, has shut that down. That and others all across Canada laid off literally 1,500 to 2,000 people. Just that's how much it squeezed the biggest player in the market. They've absorbed other companies, because some companies have just given their licenses back to Health Canada too. I was actually doing a little update for myself for this call, and I've seen over 100 companies have voluntarily revoked their licenses, because if you're not generating revenue, if you're unable to meet the standards required by Health Canada, which they've relaxed a little more now, but initially it was Wild West. There was definitely some, like, why am I sitting in a downtown Vancouver office looking out on Pender with a beautiful view and other people around me in this really expensive office, I'm sure, and we haven't grown or sold a thing yet? That always kind of irked me. I was like, I get into my, if you're in supply chain, it's pretty much pennies, and you're always a cost center. So you're always thinking about, what is this costing us to do, right? Every time you touch something, and I'm looking around a room full of people downtown Vancouver going, we better start generating some revenue soon, right?
So when we chatted earlier, you mentioned another thing that was quite interesting, which was the changeover from the way that cannabis could be handled from a sort of previous where it was treated like a heroin to the following day where it was like treated like a beer.
Yes. So the good reminder too, because leading up to legalization, which was mid-October of 2018, I believe, the day before that date, you had to handle cannabis like a class 1 drug, whatever it was classified at the time, which was similar to heroin and other illegal substances. The date, 1 minute after midnight of that date, you could now handle it as a legal substance that could be sold commercially. But you weren't allowed to use any of the new legislation about the handling, the packaging, and the shipping until 1 minute after midnight. But that 1 minute after midnight was the opening day of sales. And you might remember the media, back then, but there was a big uproar about not being enough cannabis at all the places. Stores didn't get any or were sold out very quickly. I remember watching like live from the East Coast so they could show the first person buying the first legal joint. And then within about 6 hours, the media flipped to there's no cannabis available anywhere. What's going on? How come the suppliers can't supply? And Health Canada just did one of these, but you can't flick the switch like that. Like, you know, you changed metric overnight, but there's a lot of training and lead in to get there. And this wasn't. This was very the day before legalization. If I wanted to go get cannabis out of with a secure area, which at that time had to be a safe, like a physical. Think of a bank vault safe. You had to have a safe in your facility, and 2 people had to go in, and both had to be on camera with show their ID to the camera. Cameras inside the safe. 2 people went in, removed the material, you know, filled out forms, physically brought it out, filled out more forms. People weren't allowed in the room when the cannabis came into another room. The day after that, the safe door could be open. You could just go get cannabis, bring it out, put it in a bowl, and start putting it in packaging. So the difference was literally moments. It was. I don't think they thought it through, or they didn't talk to supply chain people, Health Canada, when they did this.
And that's exactly the point that I wanted to bring up, was that, you know, there's a role for supply chain professionals, and we're out there, we've got this experience in doing these things, and it's a specific need in business. I had a chat to a supply chain consultant earlier as well, and you know, it's the same thing. We talked about readiness and the client journey readiness in a warehouse, but there's all of this expertise that us as supply chain professionals have gone through, and you know, it glibly gets passed out when you think about marketing and sales, you know. Anyway, I have the same argument about warehouse labeling. You know, the marketing and sales guys put the batch number and the expiry date in a tiny little print in the bottom corner, and in the warehouse we need to see that so we can work with it, you know. Create this for supply chain, not for this market only. Anyway, so those are fascinating stories about the cannabis supply chain. But okay, now tell us a bit about what you're doing at the moment. So the fibers that you guys are producing, and you're with a company called Best Fiber at the moment, consulting to them, and they've got an interesting product.
Yeah, so we're using natural-based fibers to create bale. We are the middleware, as we call ourselves, or the wholesale supplier. So we're supplying bulk quantities of what I would describe as a bale, the same footprint as a pellet, about 3.5 feet high and weighing about 200 to 250 kilos per bale. So we'll put 80 of these bales in a 53-foot trailer, or maybe 70 in a 40-foot container, just to give everybody a perspective of the size and scale of it. What those bales started as is hemp plants in the field, hemp and flax. Flax has been around for a long time. It's used in the linen industry. It's recently been used more in natural fiber industry, where you're having it added to things that makes it a little more natural. Hemp has been a long time regular everyday material in Europe that's been used for 100 years, and it has its own market, and it's a very mature market, where hemp in North America is viewed upon as part of the cannabis industry. But the hemp that we grow or we use for fibers looks more like bamboo, because the objective of growing this type of hemp is it grows very high and very fast, like in 6 weeks. The space between where the leaves pop out, the bigger the space between in that area, the longer the fiber. The longer the fiber, the more availability you have to make more things with it. Short fiber is harder to get together. Longer fiber is easier to, if you cut it, you still have room to work with. So, so you think, you picture 8-foot tall bamboo trees, but they have, looks like marijuana leaves on them. No flowers, it's just fiber.
Yeah.
Farmers cut it down. They break the fiber down that's inside the stalk itself. And Bast Fiber, by the way, is, as much as it's Bast Fiber Technologies is our company name, Bast Fiber is the name of natural-based fibers. So if you look at, Bast has existed previously as a word. So it includes hemp, flax, stinging nettle, or nettle is a natural fiber. So these are the natural fibers that get used. So traditionally, they've been used to make a scratchy belt or a crappy handbag, or maybe something at IKEA so they can say, this is 100% natural. Now there's a demand in the market on a high volume scale because of legislation in Europe and Canada and the US to eliminate microplastics from supply chains in the next less than 5 years in Europe, and probably less than 10 years in Canada and US. So the very big 100-plus-year-old suppliers in the non-woven industry who have been not surviving on, but using lycos, which is kind of heated up wood pulp mixed with some goo, which is some of those microplastics, but it allows them to have a continuous supply of material that never ends and extrude it into anything. And that could be surgical masks, throwaway wipes, diaper liners, all these sorts of things that we throw away every day. Even a rag that someone uses in a bar to wipe the counter. A lot of those have a lot of plastics in them. So our material is entering that supply chain. So now, and because there's legislative pressure from the other side, these companies are now demanding the material. So we fortunately got on the market a few years ahead of the others, have a lot of patents and intellectual protection on some things right now, but the clock is ticking on that. So we're ramping up to, I'm helping them support ramp up of 2 facilities, one in Germany, one in the United States, to supply at a much higher scale than we currently are today. Because once these companies provide you a PO, it's a PO for a year of deliver me X tens of thousands of metric tons per month kind of PO. So we're ramping it to get to that scale. At the same time, I'm also bringing in, as I said earlier, an ERP system that our go live is this fall.
What's the demand like for this material? Is it just growing exponentially?
The demand is now because the pressures have come, and there's also, I think, in the from a customer facing side, a lot of people are asking for it. They're looking for it. They're looking for natural based fibers. People are a little less hesitant just to throw anything out in the garbage. We're a little more aware. Europe's probably better at it than Canada is. Than the US is probably the worst at it, and not in a negative statement. Just that's just the cultures, but those are shifting. So the demand is starting to come at the store shelf level of, I will pay an extra $1 for this because it's natural, because it says I can throw it in the landfill. Because the one thing about 100% hemp-based wipe, if you used it and put it out in your garden, in about 3 or 4 days, it would be gone. It'll break down right into the soil. So part of the testing we do is we make a wipe and other material, and they go to a lab where they do the actual breakdown testing, and could be 30 days, X amount of days, but 100% hemp-based, unless it has specific additives to it, will generally break down in less than 5 or 6 days, gone back into the soil. And it's a very, it's a regenerative product. It's a regenerative plant. Hemp naturally removes toxins from the soil. So farmers used to use hemp quite often, even they still do today in Canada, to clean their soil. So they grew soy for a couple of seasons. They would run 1 grow of hemp in that area, because hemp will pull toxins out of the soil naturally without making it do anything. And then they'd cut it down and burn it, and then they'd do their soy again and kind of rotate hemp through. Hemp was kind of the cleaning brush that came through. Yeah, it is an amazing plant. And I mean, 6 to 8 weeks, you have a full crop you can cut down and start again. So it grows at the least amount, it grows with minimal water. So you can grow it in a lot of climates and a lot of soils too.
Right. Yeah, it's mind-blowing that we've got these technologies and these products out there, and we're always worried about the planet, and we're worried about pollution, and we're worried about this, but there are solutions, and there are great solutions. It just takes a little bit of time for them to come, and I think we're on the right path. So it's fantastic to hear that story. And I did some research on the product, and I encourage anyone listening to go and take a look at what the products that Bast Fiber are producing, but also the products that can be made from hemp. It's fascinating. Yeah,
it is. It's impressive.
Ian, really, it's been like a whirlwind. I think we're already on a 40-minute chat, and it's amazing how quickly it's gone. But so much interest, so fascinating, and I'm sure that our audience will enjoy the content that we've provided. Thank you very much for coming on. I think it's been a great chat.
Thank you, Craig. Appreciate it.
And then, just for the benefit of the people watching, where should they reach out for information on Bast Fibers? Is it just the website?
It's Bast Fiber, BAST, bastfibertechnologies.com.
Okay, and you're now sort of acting as a consultant to them. So and again, your directive is, what roles can I find which have got meaning and that, in your words, can almost create a legacy for you, rather than just doing some work in supply chain.
Yeah, I've shipped my fair share of iPhones and microwaves. I'd like to leave. I'm in a position now where I feel I'd rather, and I'm more interested in the role that allows me to make a culpable change in people's lives every day than to load up another truck full of bananas and ship it somewhere.
Yeah. So if anyone has those types of interests, reach out to Ian. Yeah.
Yeah,
really,
I'm consulting, but I'm actively looking at the same time too. So I'm definitely looking for my next opportunity.
So, and they can find Ian, you're on LinkedIn, Ian Mackenzie, and you'll pick up a link to him on my profile as well. But search on LinkedIn, based out of Vancouver. Great to chat to you, Ian. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Craig.